I was born in Argentina of an American mother married to an Argentine attorney. When I was about 3.5 or 4 years old, I was stricken by polio. So it was not at all uncommon for my mother to bring me back and forth between Buenos Aires and the United States for medical treatment. The year that I was about 5.5, it was a day or two before we were supposed to go back. My mother came into my room very distraught and told me that there had been a terrible accident and that my father and my grandparents had all been killed in a tragic car accident, and that because of that there was no reason for us to return to Argentina. A couple of years later, the story changed and she was forced to admit that they were still alive, but then she began inculcating me with the belief that my father was a very evil man, that my grandparents were evil people. She told me that my father had remarried to the classic evil stepmother, and that if I ever went down there, that I would never be allowed to come back to be with my mother ever again. We lived underground for about 10 years. We moved probably 13 or 14 different times. We changed names. The vast majority of the time, I knew no one else other than my mother. My mother was my entire world. My entire survival depended on her. Things began to change a little bit. I finished high school. I decided I really had to go find my father and see what was really going on, what was truth and what was fiction. And my mother had began to reestablish some connection with her family members. So they all had connections back to Buenos Aires, and I called one of my aunts. She gave me my father's phone number, and I literally went to a payphone booth with a lot of dimes and quarters and called Argentina, talked to my father for the first time in really about almost 11 years. I think the phone call was one of joy, and I think particularly hearing his joy and his happiness at hearing from his son. He had spent a very large part of the intervening 11 years we were gone trying to find us. He made many trips to the United States. He tried law enforcement help. He hired private detectives, but unfortunately, because we were moving so much and changing identities, he was never successful. So it took many years for my father and I both to establish some kind of trust. As the years went by, my father and I became increasingly close, and by the time he died 2 years ago, I think I have the luxury of being able to say that there's really nothing that my father and I needed to say to each other which we had not been able to say before he passed away. It's a deeply, deeply traumatizing experience that is fundamentally transforming of one's personality and one's life.